I fell in love with someone whose face I didn't know. That's the part one still feels stupid saying out loud, even now, because if you say it to the wrong person, they immediately assume you're naive or desperate, or that it was all some fantasy you made up in your head. But it wasn't like that. It felt real in a way that scared the hell out of me. It started on a random Tuesday night when I couldn't sleep and downloaded an app I'd sworn I was done with. No expectations. No, this could be something. Just boredom and a half-empty glass of cheap red wine. His profile name was Elliot. No last name, no photos, just a gray default icon and a bio that said, "I'm better at words than pictures." Normally I'd swipe past that without thinking. No photos was an automatic no for me. But that line caught me at exactly the wrong moment. So I messaged him. I don't even remember what I said first. Probably something sarcastic. What I remember is how quickly he answered. Not with a hey or sup, but with an actual sentence, a thoughtful one, and then another, and another. By the end of that night, it felt like we'd already skipped the awkward small talk and landed somewhere deeper than we had any right to be. He asked questions that weren't generic. He remembered my answers. He noticed things. The next day, I checked the app at work more times than I want to admit. And every time, there he was. Messages waiting. Long ones. The kind you don't skim. The kind you read twice. We talked about everything. Music we used to hide in our headphones in high school, the cities we wanted to leave, and the ones we were afraid to move to. He told me about his insomnia. I told him about my habit of staying in relationships too long, just to avoid being alone. Somewhere in that first week, I realized I was smiling at my phone like an idiot. The no photo thing came up naturally. I asked him, casually, like it didn't matter. He didn't dodge the question. He just said, "I'm not ready for that yet." I should have backed off then. That was the sensible thing to do. But he followed it up with, "If that's a deal breaker, I understand." And it wasn't. Not anymore. Days turned into weeks. We moved off the app and started texting, then voice notes. Hearing his voice for the first time did something to me I wasn't prepared for. It was calm, a little rough around the edges, like he didn't waste words unless they mattered. I replayed that first message more than once, telling myself it was just curiosity. We never FaceTimed, never sent selfies. We joked about it sometimes, him calling himself a cryptid, me threatening to imagine him as a faceless movie character. But there was always this unspoken tension under the humor. I knew what he knew, and he knew it too. Eventually, one of us would have to ask. The emotional connection got intense in that quiet, sneaky way. He became the person I wanted to tell things to first. When something good happened, I thought of him. When something bad did, I waited for his reply to feel grounded again. That scared me more than the missing photos ever did. Because at some point, fantasy runs out, and reality shows up, whether you're ready or not. The night he suggested we meet in person, my stomach dropped so hard I thought I might actually be sick. "No pressure," he wrote. "Just coffee, somewhere public. We can bail anytime." I stared at the message for a long time. I was afraid of what he might look like, afraid of what I might feel, afraid that whatever we had would disappear the second he became real. And underneath all of that, there was one thought I didn't want to admit. What if I mattered more to him as words on a screen than I ever could in real life? I typed out a reply, deleted it, typed another, and finally, with my heart pounding like I was about to jump off something high, I sent, "Okay, let's do it." I didn't sleep at all that night. The days leading up to the meetup were worse than the night after I agreed. Somehow, anticipation was harder to sit with than fear. We set a date for Saturday, late morning. A cafe halfway between us, neutral territory, like we were negotiating a ceasefire instead of a first meeting. He suggested it, probably on purpose. Somewhere bright, somewhere safe. We still didn't exchange photos. That part became louder the closer we got, not in what we said, but in what we didn't. There were moments when the conversation stalled for a second longer than usual, like we were both circling the same thought and refusing to land on it. On Thursday night, I almost asked again. I typed, "Do you want to send a picture before Saturday?" and stared at it until my phone dimmed. I deleted it. Because the truth was, if he said no, I didn't know what I'd do with that. And if he said yes, I was terrified I'd feel disappointed, and even more terrified that I wouldn't. Friday night, he sent me a voice note instead. "I'm nervous," he said, his voice quieter than usual. Just wanted to say that out loud. I sat on my bed, listening to it twice. Then a third time. "I am too," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "But I'm still glad we're doing this." There was a pause before his response came back. "Me too. Even if it's awkward. Even if it's weird." Saturday morning, I stood in front of my closet like it was judging me. I changed shirts 3 times. Nothing felt right. Everything felt like too much or not enough. Eventually, I settled on something simple. Black jeans, soft gray sweater, my cleanest sneakers. I left early anyway. Anxiety has never respected schedules. The cafe was already busy when I got there, all soft chatter and clinking cups. I picked a small table near the window, ordered a coffee I barely wanted, and checked my phone. "I'm here," I texted him. 3 dots appeared almost immediately. "Same. I'm outside. Give me a sec." My chest tightened. I looked up every time the door opened. I had no idea who I was looking for. Every man who walked in felt like a possibility for half a second before my brain rejected him. Too tall, too young, too confident, too nervous. Then the door opened again. He hesitated before stepping inside. I knew it was him before I understood why. He scanned the room slowly, like he was bracing himself. He wore a dark jacket, zipped halfway up, hands shoved into the pockets. There was something familiar in the way he stood, the way his shoulders carried tension. Our eyes met. It wasn't fireworks. It wasn't cinematic. It was quieter than that. Recognition. Not physical, not exactly. Emotional, like my brain went, "Oh, there you are." He smiled, small, uncertain, and walked toward me. "Julian?" he asked. "Elliot," I said, standing up too fast, nearly knocking my chair back. We laughed at the same time. That awkward, relieved kind of laugh. He was a little shorter than I imagined. His hair was darker too. He had tired eyes, the kind that looked like they'd seen a lot of late nights. But he was real, solid, standing in front of me. "Hi," he said again, softer. "Hi." We hugged, briefly, carefully. It wasn't natural yet, but it wasn't wrong either. When we pulled back, there was a beat where neither of us moved. "So," he said, gesturing to the table. "Coffee?" We sat. Conversation came easier than I expected. Not effortless, but comfortable. Like we were picking up a thread instead of starting from scratch. We talked about the place, the weather, the fact that neither of us had slept much. Every so often, I caught him looking at me like he was checking something against memory. I knew I was doing the same. Halfway through my cup, I realized my hands had stopped shaking. "I'm glad you're you," I said suddenly, then immediately wanted to crawl under the table. He blinked, then smiled. Really smiled this time. "Yeah," he said. "Me too." There was still fear sitting between us. Unspoken, but present. The question of attraction. Of what came next. Of whether words could survive reality. But for the first time since we matched, I felt something unexpected settle in my chest. Hope. Not big. Not reckless. Just enough to stay. After the cafe, neither of us stood up right away. We sat there, empty cups between us, like leaving would mean breaking some kind of spell. I watched Elliot trace the rim of his mug with his thumb, slow and distracted. It was such a small thing, but it felt intimate in a way I wasn't ready to name. "So," he said finally, exhaling like he'd been holding his breath for an hour. "That wasn't terrible," I laughed. "High praise." "No, I mean it," he said quickly. I was half expecting to want to fake an emergency and run. "Same," I admitted. I had a whole imaginary text from a friend ready. He smiled at that, then hesitated. Do you want to walk for a bit? There's a park a few blocks over. There it was, the next step. Not dramatic, but meaningful. Yeah, I said. I'd like that. Outside, the air was cold enough to wake me up fully. We fell into step next to each other without thinking about it. The city hummed around us, people passing, cars rushing by, life continuing like nothing monumental had just happened. We talked as we walked, but there were more pauses now. Comfortable ones, the kind where silence didn't feel like a test. At the park, we sat on a bench facing a narrow strip of trees. Leaves crunched under people's shoes nearby. Somewhere, a dog barked. This is the part, Elliot said quietly, staring ahead. Where I usually freak out. I glanced at him. What do you mean? Online, I can take my time. Edit myself. Be braver. He swallowed. In person, I worry I'll disappoint. Something tightened in my chest. You're not, I said without thinking. Then, softer, at least not to me. He looked at me then, really looked. His eyes searched my face like he was trying to decide whether to believe me. Can I ask you something? He said. Yeah, why did you stick around? His voice wasn't accusing, just honest. No photos, no guarantees. Most guys wouldn't. I thought about it for a second. Because you made me feel seen, I said. And because I was scared, but not bored. That earned a quiet laugh. Fair, he said. Very fair. We sat there for a while longer. Shoulders almost touching. Almost. The space between us felt deliberate, like neither of us wanted to rush it or break it. Eventually, he stood. I should probably go, he said, before I overthink this into oblivion. I stood too, suddenly not wanting the moment to end. Me too, I said. Then, awkwardly, but I'd like to see you again. He smiled, relief flashing across his face so clearly it made my chest ache. I was hoping you'd say that. We hugged again, longer this time. His arms were warm, solid. When we pulled back, neither of us let go right away. I'll text you, he said. I'll be waiting, I replied. Walking home alone felt strange, like I'd left something important behind, but also like I was carrying something new with me. Later that night, lying in bed, my phone buzzed. I keep replaying today, Elliot wrote. Still kinda can't believe it. I smiled into the dark. Me neither, I typed back. But I'm glad it was real. The fear wasn't gone. Not even close. There were still questions we hadn't asked, truths we hadn't touched yet. But for the first time since this all started, I wasn't afraid of what might come next. I was curious, and that felt like enough, for now. This second date scared me more than the first. The first meeting had been protected by novelty, by low expectations, and the unspoken agreement that anything short of disaster was a win. A second date meant intent. It meant we were no longer just seeing if something existed, but whether it could last beyond initial curiosity. We didn't rush it. A week passed. Then another. We texted every day, but the tone shifted slightly. Less cautious, more honest, less performance. One night, close to midnight, Elliot sent, "Can I admit something kind of embarrassing?" I stared at the screen, heart already picking up speed. Always, I wrote. I keep worrying that the version of me you like is still the one on your phone. I lay back against my pillows, exhaling slowly. I worry about the same thing, I typed. About you. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Then, do you want to prove ourselves wrong? That's how we planned the second date. Dinner this time. Not fancy. Just a quiet place with bad lighting and decent food. Something that required sitting across from each other for longer than an hour. Something real. When I got there, Elliot was already waiting, nervously scrolling through his phone like he needed something to anchor him. He looked up when he saw me, and his face softened in a way that still surprised me. "You're early?" he said. "I didn't trust myself not to be," I replied. We hugged, naturally this time. No hesitation. His hand rested at my back for half a second longer than necessary, and my brain absolutely noticed. Over dinner, the conversation went deeper. Not heavier, just more vulnerable. He told me about a past relationship that had ended quietly, painfully. I told him about my fear of being chosen only temporarily. There were moments where we both went quiet, sitting with the weight of what had been said, but neither of us rushed to fill the space. At one point, he looked at me and said, "Can I say something without you overthinking it?" I laughed. "I'll try." "I'm attracted to you," he said simply. I just needed time to feel safe enough to say it out loud. My chest tightened, warm and terrifying all at once. "I'm attracted to you too," I said, and I was scared that if I said it first, it would change things. He smiled at that. I think it already has. After dinner, we walked again. Apparently, that was becoming our thing. When we stopped outside my building, neither of us moved to say goodbye. The street was quiet. Yellow light from the lamppost spilled onto the sidewalk between us. "I don't want to rush," Elliot said, "but I also don't want to pretend I don't want this." He didn't kiss me. Instead, he reached for my hand. Just that. His fingers were warm, slightly rough. The contact sent something electric through me, sharper than any kiss would have been. "I like this pace," I said softly. "Me too," he replied. "It feels intentional." We stood there, a moment longer, hands still linked, like letting go would undo something fragile. When he finally left, I went upstairs, feeling lighter than I had in months. Later that night, my phone buzzed. "Thank you for not rushing me," he wrote, "and for not leaving when I made things slow." I smiled into the dark. "Thank you for being brave enough to be real," I replied. I didn't know where this was going yet. There were still fears, still unknowns, still parts of each other we hadn't uncovered. But for the first time, I wasn't building a connection on imagination alone. I was building it on choice, and that felt like the most dangerous and beautiful thing of all. It wasn't one big moment that changed things. It was accumulation. Morning texts that weren't just good morning, but I dreamed about this weird thing, and you were there. Voice notes sent while he walked home, the sound of traffic in the background, his voice relaxed in a way it never was before. The way my name sounded different when he said it now, less careful, more familiar. We started seeing each other once a week, sometimes twice, when neither of us wanted to admit we'd already crossed that line. Still slow, still intentional. The first time he came over to my place, I cleaned like someone important was coming. Because someone was. I wiped down surfaces that didn't need wiping, lit a candle I forgot I owned, then blew it out because it felt like too much. When he knocked, my heart jumped like it always did. "Hey," he said when I opened the door, smiling in that way that had become dangerous for me. "Hey." He stepped inside, glanced around, taking it in. "This feels very you. Is that good or bad?" "Good," he said quickly. "Comfortable, lived in." We cooked together, badly. Music played quietly from my phone. At one point, we bumped into each other in the kitchen, hands brushing, and the air shifted. Subtle, but unmistakable. I felt it before I understood it. Later, we sat on the couch, not touching, both pretending we didn't notice how close our knees were. "This is the part where I usually overthink everything," Elliot said suddenly. I smiled faintly. "You've mentioned." He turned to face me. "Can I ask you something real?" I nodded. "What happens if this gets harder?" The question hung between us. I didn't answer right away. Because it deserved honesty, not reassurance for reassurance's sake. "Then we talk," I said finally. "And if it stops being good, we don't force it." He studied my face, like he was checking for cracks. "And if it is good," he asked, "then we don't sabotage it just because it scares us." That earned a quiet laugh. "You're very calm about this." "I'm not," I admitted. "I'm just choosing not to run." Something in his expression softened then. He shifted closer, not rushing, not dramatic, just enough that our shoulders touched. Neither of us pulled away. The first kiss didn't happen that night. Instead, he rested his head briefly against my shoulder, like he needed to feel grounded, like he trusted me to be steady. I didn't move. I didn't need more than that. When he left later, standing in my doorway, he hesitated. "I'm glad it's you," he said. "Me too," I replied. That night, lying in bed alone, I realized something that made my chest tighten, not with fear this time, but with clarity. I wasn't afraid of his face anymore. I wasn't afraid of the pace. I wasn't even afraid of being disappointed. I was afraid because this was starting to feel like something I could actually lose. And somehow, despite that, I wanted to keep going anyway. Because love didn't arrive all at once like it does in movies. Sometimes it crept in quietly, through long messages, shared silences, and the courage it took to stay. The kiss happened on a night that wasn't supposed to be important. No build-up, no dramatic confession, just rain, bad timing, and the quiet understanding that something had shifted whether we named it or not. Elliot came over late, soaked through his jacket, hair darker from the rain. He laughed when I handed him a towel, the sound easy, unguarded. "Sorry," he said. I almost bailed. "Long day. I'm glad you didn't," I replied, and meant it more than I expected. We didn't cook. We ordered takeout and ate on the couch, knees touching now, without pretending they weren't. Outside, rain streaked down the windows, the city muted and soft. At some point, the conversation slowed. Not awkwardly, just naturally. He leaned back, head tilted, watching me like he was listening, even when I wasn't speaking. "What?" I asked. He shook his head. "Nothing. He stopped, exhaled. "I feel calm with you. That's new for me." Something warm settled in my chest. "I feel that too," I said quietly. The space between us closed almost on its own. He didn't rush it, didn't grab, just leaned in, slow enough that I could stop him if I wanted to. I didn't. The kiss was soft, careful, more question than statement. When we pulled back, his forehead rested against mine. "Okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I breathed. "You?" "Yeah." We didn't go further than that. No clothes off, no urgency, just another kiss. Slightly braver this time, hands finding familiar places. My waist, his shoulder, like we were learning a language together. Afterward, we stayed like that, tangled and quiet. "This would have been so much easier if we'd rushed it," he said suddenly, half smiling. "Would it?" I asked. He considered it. "No, probably not." He stayed over that night, fully clothed, on opposite sides of the bed at first, until sometime before morning, when I felt his hand find mine in the dark. I held it. In the weeks that followed, things deepened. Not loudly, but undeniably. We started using "we" without realizing it, planning things further out, letting each other into the messy parts we usually hid. One night, lying beside me, Elliot said, "Can I tell you why I didn't post photos?" I turned to face him. "Yeah, I was scared," he said simply. Not of rejection, of being seen. I'd gotten used to being liked for my thoughts, not my face. It felt safer. I reached for his hand. "I'm glad you trusted me anyway." He squeezed my fingers. "I'm glad you waited." Looking back, I understand now why it worked. It wasn't because we avoided risk. It was because we chose it. Slowly, honestly, without hiding behind screens forever. Love didn't need a face to begin, but it needed courage to stay. The first real crack didn't come from jealousy or distance. It came from fear, not the obvious kind, the dramatic, tearful kind, but the quiet, practical kind that sounds like logic when it's actually self-protection. It happened on a Sunday morning. Elliot was still half asleep beside me, hair a mess, one arm thrown over the pillow like he'd claimed the space without realizing it. I watched him breathe for a moment, feeling that now familiar mix of warmth and unease. This was real now. Not just happening, but existing. And real things ask questions. Over coffee, still wrapped in that soft morning calm, he said, "My sister asked about you." I looked up. "Oh?" Yeah. She said, I smile at my phone like an idiot again. He smiled faintly. She hasn't seen that in a while. Something in my chest tightened, not unpleasantly, but heavily. What did you tell her? I asked. That I'm seeing someone. He hesitated. That I care. Care. Not talking to. Not dating casually. Care. And how did that feel? I asked. He stared into his mug for a moment. Good. Terrifying. Both. That's when I realized we were standing at the edge of the same thing, looking at it from opposite sides. A few days later, it was my turn. My friend Noah, who knew me too well, raised an eyebrow over drinks and said, So, you're glowing. Who is he? I opened my mouth, and nothing came out. That silence followed me home. When Elliot noticed I was quieter than usual that night, I tried to brush it off, but he didn't let me. Hey, he said gently, sitting closer. You don't disappear like that unless something's up. I sighed, rubbing my hands together. I'm scared. Of me? He asked, not accusing. Just honest. Of how much this matters, I said. Of introducing you to my life and realizing I can't control the outcome anymore. He nodded slowly. Yeah, that tracks. We sat there, not touching this time. The distance felt heavier than closeness ever had. I don't want to lose what we have, I said, but I also don't want to freeze it in place just because it's safe right now. Elliot looked at me, eyes steady. Then we don't freeze. And we don't rush. We just keep choosing each other until one of us can't. The simplicity of it nearly undid me. You're really okay with that uncertainty? I asked. No, he said, but I'm okay with you. That night, when we held each other, it felt different. Not lighter, but stronger. Less illusion. More truth. Love, I was learning, wasn't the absence of fear. It was the decision to stay present anyway. And as I fell asleep with his arm around me, I realized something else too. The hardest part of meeting him hadn't been not knowing his face. It had been learning to let myself be seen in return. We didn't say, I love you right away, which, in hindsight, feels almost funny considering everything we'd already said without using those words. It came out on an ordinary night. No rain, no dramatic silence. Just the two of us sitting on my couch, feet tangled, some half-watched show playing in the background. Elliot was quiet, not distant, just focused inward. You're doing it again, I said gently. Doing what? That thing where you disappear into your head like you're about to make a pros and cons list. He huffed a soft laugh. Am I that obvious? To me? Yeah. He turned to face me fully, pulling one knee up onto the couch. Okay, then I'll say it instead of thinking it. My chest tightened, not with fear this time, but anticipation. I don't want this to stay undefined forever, he said. Not because I need labels to feel secure, but because I'm already acting like this matters, and I want to be honest about that. I nodded slowly. Me too. I don't want to keep bracing for the moment you decide this is too much, he continued. And I don't want to keep one foot out the door just in case. I swallowed. Neither do I. There was a beat of silence, not heavy, just real. So, he said, voice softer now, I love you. And I don't need you to say it back right now. I just needed you to know. Something in me loosened. Not exploded. Settled. I love you too, I said. I've just been afraid that saying it would turn it fragile. He smiled, eyes warm. It already is. That's kind of the point. He kissed me then. Not tentative, not rushed. Just sure. Later that night, lying beside him, I thought about how strange it was that the most emotionally intimate connection of my life had begun without a single photo. No filters. No angles. No curated version. Just words. Patience. Choice. When people ask now how we met, I usually say, online. And they nod, like they understand. But what I really mean is this. I met him in sentences. In pauses. And the courage it took for both of us to stay when leaving would have been easier. And when I finally learned his face, it wasn't a reveal. It was a recognition. Because I already knew him.